I just want to say welcome to everybody for joining in to Punch Kick Choke Chat. As you can tell, I'm not Sean Benson. And I was just saying to everybody that Sean is away getting married to the same girl a second time, this time in France, and we're really happy for him. And he will be back next week. He's going to be back for sure. But who we have tonight is we have Sensei Scott Evans. He's a good friend of mine. I've trained with him, taught on the same floor with him. He's a better friend to Sensei Suino. They've known each other for a really long time. He was actually a student of Sensei Suino's for a while. Um, and Sensei Evans, if you don't know what we like to do, um, we like to jump out of the gate with a question right away. And the question that I have for you tonight is, I understand from a karate realm, different styles, right? So, you have Shorin-ryu, Shotokan, Goju-ryu, Chito-ryu, Wado-ryu. One thing that I think people don't understand is what makes up a style of jujitsu. Like everybody thinks of jujitsu as, hey, you can lock an arm, you can lock a shoulder, you can lock a leg. You do a specific style of jujitsu. What makes up a style of jujitsu? What are the differentiators? If you could lead us through that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's a really great question. What makes a style? I think I'll start with for people that aren't familiar or for people that come from a BJJ background, typically they're going to think of what we do or in my particular style as Japanese jiu-jitsu. That's what you're going to hear over and over, and then they're BJJ, right? So I think those are the two. That's what people tend to think of with our particular system. That's what I can speak to. We're historically was unarmed combat, right? You couldn't access a weapon, you had to defend yourself. And so our system is made up of some fundamental principles, but that have been adapted for modern society. And I can certainly dive more into that. But I think what makes up our system in particular is just the ability. I often like to say this. When I was younger, there were these book series called Choose Your Own Adventure, and you got to kind of direct your path through the narrative of the story. And so what we do is essentially equip people and give them tools in their tool belt to ideally have the outcome they're looking for in the moment, right? It could be simply an escape depending on the context. It could be, a strike of some kind. It could be a joint lock. It depends on the context. So I think for us in our particular system, it's a method of self-defense, and that's where our focus is. And we're looking to try to guide the outcome, right? To ideally defend ourselves and the people we're with, and then to neutralize the threat, whatever that might look like.
So, okay, that's a great starting answer. I do BJJ. I don't do stand up Japanese jiu-jitsu as you called it,
Mhm.
but I know Suino Sensei does. So, and I know you both do different styles of jiu-jitsu. Suino Sensei, what is your take on what's the difference between you and Sensei Evans and the styles that you do?
He's better looking, makes more money than me. But other than that, um, uh, so virtually all quote unquote Japanese jujitsu hails from the same set of sources, right? It comes from old family style jujitsu systems. Arguably, those come from even older systems where uh, samurai that were wearing armor would fight with swords, and then when somebody lost a sword and a knife and they had nothing left, then they would battle on the ground. Um, and things evolve from there. What do you do? How do you take down people? How do you wrist lock them? How do you throw them? How do you defend against those things? They all came kind of through the same gates. And usually what it is, in my opinion, and I'm really only, if I'm an expert in anything, I'm really only expert in one Nihon Jiu-Jitsu system that was a composite system put together by Sato Shizuya Sensei. It's a post-World War II compendium of Jiu-Jitsu techniques. But I think they're all kind of like this. It's a set of techniques that are arguably, there are many the same between the systems. There are some different between the systems, but the emphasis that you put on them. How combative is the system? How hard, how soft is it? How much do they emphasize kata style practice versus randori style practice? And then there's smaller nuanced stuff like how do they fall? Do they fall more like Aikido practitioners where they tuck the inside leg? Do they slap with both feet? Right? So it goes down a rabbit hole pretty quick. I think we essentially do the same thing, um, just with some differences around the edges.
Sensei Evans, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's a far more descriptive answer than I gave out of the gate there. I think just maybe to build off what Suino Sensei said, I think yeah, that same origin, right? The same origin story, and that's how it was presented to us. There's a for us, there's a lot of our waza that basically half the techniques we do are techniques done for form for teaching purposes, and so you're going to see a lot of wrist grabs, trying to stop the draw, try to counter the draw of a sword, and then what we've done is what we're looking to do is add a pragmatic layer to that, right? So adapt it to real life self-defense. So what if someone tries to grab me, puts a gun on my face, throws me at the ground? Can I defend myself from that? And I think that's, as Suino Sensei said, you're going to see it, there's only so many ways a human body can move, especially when you're doing joint locks. And so we really try to, there's going to be certain emphasis that you'll have on certain aspects based on the context.
Love that. Sounds very similar to karate styles. They all come from Matsumura, from the root, and then they branch off in different directions, and people took different takes on it. But in the end, it's some kicking and punching, and there's probably more similarities than differences. And it's actually what you said, Evan said, it's the thinking that's the difference, right? Is it more combative or is it more artistic? And yeah, so that helps me a lot. I want to say to everybody, thanks for joining the show live. If you're joining live or if you're on YouTube, we really appreciate it. If you're watching later, we appreciate that too. You can join us on any of the major platforms for podcasts. And it's always helpful if you give us a like or put a comment, or if you want to go above and beyond, copy and paste the link and share it with somebody. It's going to help us a lot. Tonight, as I said, Sean Benson's not here. I'm joined with my two teachers. And in Canada this weekend, it's Thanksgiving weekend, not American Thanksgiving. And so I just simply want to say about my teachers, I'm super grateful and thankful to have them in my life. They're amazing people. I know I can count on them, and I know they can count on me. And that's what I want to say about them. I know we're going to be together within 24 hours in Michigan together teaching. Evan Sensei, if you're around and you want to come in and say hi, please do. We'd love to see you. It would be awesome because I know you're in the neighborhood and you're close by. I guarantee you we'll all come over and give you a big hug and be happy to see you if you join in. If you are watching as well and you want to ask a question of Evan Sensei or any of us, put it in the chat. Dree, who's hosting tonight, will light that up. You can put it in there. And if it's a good question, we'll ask it of Evan Sensei. If it's not, we're just going to pretend like you never asked the question. It will just go non-existent. Nobody will ever know you asked the question except for you. And then you can email Evan Sensei and ask him the question, and he probably won't answer you either if it's a stupid question. So put it in the chat, and if it's good, we'll ask it. What I want to say about Sensei Evans is he's a proud husband and father of 3 children. We were just talking about that before. He began his martial arts journey in 1995. He attended a self-defense class at the University of Akron, which sparked his lifelong love of Hakko Denshin Ryu Jujutsu. Evan Sensei founded his school, the Koyama Dojo, in 2004 after relocating to Michigan from Ohio. And we can ask him later if he's a Buckeyes fan or if he's a Wolverines fan. If he's not a Wolverines fan, we'll just end the show now. He spent nearly 3 decades pursuing mastery and leadership in HDRJJ under the guidance of Soke LaMonica, who's kind of a legend in the jiu-jitsu world. In 2017, he achieved the rank of San Dai Kichu. I think I said that right. I apologize if I did not. And it's one of the highest levels in HDRJJ system. And in 2022, he was appointed the North American Technical Director of Hakko Denshin Ryu Jujutsu. And then in 2023, just last year, he was promoted to the title and rank of Hanshi. he was honored to see his school, Koyama Dojo, named, it's the Honbu Dojo for North America, which is also a really big honor. And if you actually look online, you can see pictures of it. It's a beautiful dojo. Um, I've mentioned this before. I've trained and taught um, with Evan Sensei, but probably half a dozen times in Godrich. We have a mutual friend who has a dojo there. That's Sean DeJong and Glenn Archibald. Also great martial artists, and Sean has been on our podcast before, so go check that out if you are wondering who I'm talking about. One of the things I want to say for myself is uh, the Zhang Sensei asked me to come and teach Iaido, and when Evan Sensei was there, and I was teaching Iaido, I just kept looking at him thinking, this guy's just a little bit too good in this martial art. He's too good out of the box. His grip is too good. He's moving too well. And then later I found out that he actually was a student of Suino Sensei's for a while doing Iaido, which made total sense to me why he was good at it. Um, One thing I would say is when I watch him teach jujitsu, he's a super technically sound person. Like he's really big on, where you put your hand to the level of where you're putting your fingers, how you're gripping, where you're moving your body. He's really super technical. I really like that. Um, Most recently, I think it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, um, the Hakko Denshin Ryu system had their North American gathering, and it was in Godrich. And I stand to be corrected, but I think it's the first time that another art other than uh, your system was ever taught. And so Sensei Suino was invited to come and teach Iaido at that. And that's the first time ever that an outside art has been taught with that group. We're really proud to have done that. And I know that you were a person who kind of fought for us to be there and be able to teach that art. And so just want to say thank you. Really proud to be there with you. Yeah, and I guess I'm going to close by just saying, Sensei Evans is a really good friend to the show. We're really proud to have him on the show, and I'm looking forward to the next hour and a bit as we crack into your story. So the first question we like to ask people, Sensei, is, I know it was a self-defense class, but what was it like? What was your upbringing? Where did you come from? Were you always interested in martial arts? How did you get into martial arts, and kind of what kept you there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And really, again, thank you for the intro. And regarding our Taikai we had just recently, it was a real honor to have Suino Sensei and yourself come and support us, and others that I've known from JMAC. So really can't thank you all enough. People really just tremendously impressed. So thank you for your support. And so what got me in? So yes, I did take a self-defense class. I went to University of Akron. And like many universities, you have to take have a gym credit, right? Like an athletic credit. And they had, 30, 40, they had scuba diving, canoeing, archery, whatever. And but I was on my own at 18 and worked at a restaurant. And so we had a fixed schedule and I couldn't deviate from that. So the only ones that didn't change halfway through the semester were ballroom dancing or self-defense. And so I'm not ballroom dancing, and that's how I got started. And so what happened was, a couple of my buddies said, "Hey, we'll take the same one with you to get our credit out of the way." And there were the instructor there I came to find out later on was a Sandan was under Sensei LaMonica. And so that was really kind of my intro to that. And so they went through some basic techniques. I didn't really know what to expect. I had never set foot in a martial arts school before this, so I had no background for it. And then my roommate at the time, he was a very big man. And so he was asked to be a bouncer at a local bar. And the person who taught us, and actually you may know him, Randy, was Steve Lonsdale because he's Canadian as well. So he came from that, had a strong karate background. So I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him, but he was the instructor. And so my friend would stick around after class and ask him questions about what if someone does this? What if someone does that? And he would just effectively just neutralize the situation, just kind of lay my buddy out, right? This big guy on the ground, after that. Then I said, I have to learn this. And so what happened was, and when I felt some of these techniques, it was really something just kind of blew me away. And so I then found out that Soke LaMonica lived in Akron, Ohio. That was the Honbu Dojo for North America. And you know, I'm like, I have to learn this. So I went out there and took my first class, and and the rest literally is history. So I just once I felt the techniques, I really had this just this amazing desire that just to keep going and just to learn it.
So you said you felt the techniques. Explain that a little bit to everybody.
Sure. Yeah, I think you know, for someone that's not been in a martial art before, up to that point, you know, you know, getting out of your comfort zone for sure. That's kind of step one, right? Just walking through the door and doing that. But I just really the interest was there, feeling that. So our system is made up of a lot of strikes, a lot of throws, and also controlling techniques. So where that comes from was from Soke LaMonica. So he was, you know, he trained in Hakaru. He also trained in other martial arts. He was in the Marines as well. So when he was in the Marines, he took judo. I believe he took kempo, and and then also he was a beat cop. So he would join that the Akron Police Force. I think it was in 1959, before they even had radios. He was literally walking a beat to do this. So he really had a breadth of experience that he brought into the art and added this level of pragmatism to it. So a lot of the techniques we do, we're looking to control the person immediately from that. So I think so you know, techniques include throwing, lots of striking, like I mentioned, and then controlling techniques through a lot of the joint locks that we use.
It's interesting you bring that up because one of the questions I had for you um, is just about like when I talk to Glenn, Sensei Archibald a lot, and Sensei DeJong, they're often teaching law enforcement. Like they do a lot of teaching of law enforcement. And I apologize, but for me, I've never really thought about Japanese jiu-jitsu as something that would be effective for law enforcement. And so a question I have for you is why is it? Like, why is it so effective for law enforcement officers? Why is it something that they should be learning, and why is it being pursued so much by them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do appreciate the question. I think because it gives, I mentioned earlier, it gives people options, and especially if you're in law enforcement, what, you know, I mean, you know, everybody has a camera on them these days. Everyone has a phone of some kind, right? So what you're looking to do is neutralize the threat, but ideally, and this is philosophically aligned with the spirit of our art, is not to cause injury. What we consider, we only tr would consider causing injury if there's what we call exceptional circumstances. So a weapon involved, multiple attackers, maybe a large size differential, you know, a petite female versus a very large man, something like that, where we're looking to utilize it. But I think the attraction for law enforcement is that it gives them options. They don't necessarily have to escalate to techniques that could potentially cause injury. They can control the individual at the time. They can control it by controlling themselves and using these techniques, and you know, effect an arrest or control the situation accordingly. So I think it gives them options without having to resort to what historically might have been you know, techniques that may not be appropriate for the given moment.
Amazing. I'm just going to pause for a second. I have more questions, but Suino Sensei or Sensei Legacy, do you have any questions at this point?
Hanshi, do you have any questions you want to ask? I've got lots I could talk about.
Well, you go ahead. It's not my field.
Um, let's get into techniques a little bit. I realize that there's always limits to talking about techniques, right? It's hard to explain techniques versus demonstrate or even show them on video. But let's say we're talking about self-defense, and we're dealing with an unarmed attacker. Let's say there's somebody drunk, you're out having a cocktail, and someone attacks you. What is a Hakko Denshin Ryu practitioner go to? Is it going to be takedowns, like Irimi Nage style takedowns? Is it going to be a Seoi Nage type judo throw? It's going to be a wrist lock. Like, I don't even know if you can answer that question, but I'd like to I'd like to wade into technique a little bit with you if we can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's a great question. I think, probably ask, 10 of our practitioners, we might get 10 different answers based on what their comfort levels are and their preference for technique. I think philosophically for the art, the first thing we're going to do is try not to engage, right? If you can avoid, first technique we teach is escaping. And so if you can avoid that, I remember someone asked Sensei LaMonica one time, what do you do if you're in a biker bar and three guys want to fight you? He said, don't be in a biker bar. Like, why would you do that? And that, from it. And so so I would say, risk avoidance, I think the most teaching from a self-defense perspective, the best technique we can teach is people to be aware of their surroundings, I think is the most important thing. And then, pursuant to that, then if we can avoid the conflict, that's fine. If we can de-escalate it verbally, de-escalation, I think, is really critical, especially if you're in law enforcement, just for anybody. And then, and then I think it's going to come down to controlling techniques. So controlling techniques, a huge component. So we have five main principles that undergird everything that we do, and one of them are atemis. So we really focus a lot on striking. It could be something very soft. It could be a distracting technique. It could be something, certainly a punch of some kind. It could be, takedown, leg sweep, hip throw, something like that, and then end with a strike to control. All under the premise. The reason why we strike is because we're looking to take the mind. If you take the mind, you can take the body, and that's where the focus comes into play. So I would say, if I had to list them, ideally escaping, don't be in the fight to begin with if it's possible. If it's not, we're going to look to distract and we're going to look to control. Wrist locks and joint controlling techniques are fantastic, but no one's going to let you do that to them out of the gate. There's going to usually be some type of striking, something else to take their focus away to accomplish that.
Um, the three hosts on this call, and Robert Chomsky, one of our key players who's not often on camera, we recorded a micro episode earlier today about practical fighting. And it's interesting how much your comment about if you can take the mind, you can take the body, resonates with some stuff we were talking about in that call. Hence, what I'd like to do is go around the horn real quick. Hanshi, earlier today, you were talking about that Zen state and how if you can stay calm, you can perhaps gain an advantage over a stronger or bigger opponent. Scott Evans Sensei just said, if we can take the mind, we can take the body. Do you want to walk that forward a little bit based on kind of what we talked about earlier today?
Well, just touching on that subject, I would say the two things that are going to freeze you is fear and pain. Fear you don't even have to make contact. But if you have a student sometime, put him in a lock and tell him he can punch you in the face. And just as he's gonna punch you, just give him a lot of pain. And you'll see that freezes the mind up. It only takes a quarter of a second or less to throw a punch. So that gives you a big advantage there. That's the things like we were talking about. So I guess that's the same thing.
Yeah, I was just fascinated how the words came out of Sensei Evans' mouth, and we were talking about a real similar concept earlier. Randy, where do you go with that? If we can take the mind, we can take the body.
I think if you have control of somebody's mind, then that's it. It's all over. It doesn't matter at that point. It doesn't really matter what the techniques are either, right? I think earlier today I said if you can control the space and the time, then you're going to control the outcome. But I think if you control the space and the time, more importantly, if you can control that person's mind, then I don't want to make it sound like Jedi stuff, but that's the reality, right? What Sensei Legacy said, if you can look at somebody and just look them deep into their soul and they become afraid, they're probably not going to do too much. You've got the upper hand at that point. And to the point of what Sensei Legacy said, I've seen him, I've seen people say like, you can't get out of my bear hug, and him say, okay, come up and put me in a bear hug. And then see him put them in a lot of pain, and they just didn't want to do their bear hug anymore after that. So I would agree 100%. If you can capture the mind through the avenues of fear or pain, then you're going to control the outcome at a high level for yourself in your favor.
Yeah, you hear boxers and UFC fighters talk about that quite a bit. They talk about the idea that, at some point you look into your opponent's eyes and you see they've lost the will to fight, right? Then it's over. right? Whether it's over in 3 seconds or it takes another round or two, but the fight's basically over there. That's kind of an analogy for quote unquote real fighting or street fighting. Sensei Evans, what broadly speaking, what percentage of Hakko Denshin Ryu techniques are done at a distance against, like long strikes, etc.? What percentage are done from sort of engaging, maybe wrist to wrist? What percentage are done from, what we'd call the clinch? Is there a way that you can kind of describe the palette of techniques that you use?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. I'll divide our techniques into two parts. We have waza, which are again predetermined techniques. That's really essentially the art that we passed along from it. So and then we have obviously levels of that, and then we just use the Japanese word for variations of just henka, and so we're going to vary that, and that's where we're going to have basically that are going to be scenario specific. So what if someone tries to obviously everyone loves a great wrist grab, right? Because it opens up a whole lot of things for it. But then obviously, what if someone grabs me from behind? What if they put a gun on my face or put a knife to my throat from behind? Things like that. And that's how we try to, again, add a level of pragmatism to it. So I would say for Waza, all of them are going to begin. I shouldn't say that. I would say 95% of them are going to begin by some physical contact with the other person, right? Some type of grab somehow, some way. A few of them will be, one of them is an imminent attack, so we're going to preemptively strike the person. Another one will be, a couple other ones will be off a strike. So that's, and then as you get into some of the more advanced levels, we then do have defense from a sword draw. And then we also have defense from other weapon attacks that we incorporate as well. So from Waza, let's say 95%. When we go into Henka, so what we would consider real life attacks, I would say the majority of them are going to, I would say 50-50 if I had to quantitate it. I would say half someone's coming off a grab, but in reality, on the street, you're never going to want to have someone get that space, right? You want to, like, I think, Randy, I didn't hear obviously what you were talking about earlier in the recording you did earlier, but you just mentioned, I think, if you control time and space, right? So, really, we're not going to let someone come up to that if we feel threatened. Ideally, we're going to preempt, ideally look to strike early on and look to close the distance so we can secure them in whatever fashion. Whether it be whatever the attack looks like, right? Someone could be coming in low, trying to take your legs. Someone could be coming in with a punch, two punches, things like that.
Amazing. I have a question that's kind of on this vein. It's about the art. I'm curious to know when somebody joins your dojo, Evan said, say, when they come walking in the door, what's their first 3 to 6 months going to look like? And then how are they progressing? This is something I know nothing about, and I'm not sure other people do as well. But you come into a jiu-jitsu dojo, how are you progressing?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say the first 3 to 6 months are going to be, first of all, I guess it really depends on if they have a previous martial arts background as well, or for that matter, it could be any physical motion, right? I think there's a mind. I'll get to your question here to answer it directly, but I think one of the things I've always loved about martial arts that I've had an opportunity to train in, and why I kind of feel like a kid in a candy store when I get to train, is that there's that mind-body connection, right? And you can see a technique, but can you actually there's so many layers to unpack there. I think that's really fantastic, and I enjoy that. So so if they don't have any previous background, what we're going to do is look to orient them to. We obviously have warm-up techniques, but then we're also going to look to orient them to our waza, because from that we're going to extract or distill out a lot of the controlling techniques that we use to make them acute, especially from a joint lock and a wrist lock perspective. So that's going to be a focus. We're also going to teach a really large focus on striking. And then also throws as well, because throws, I think, are really they're fundamental. They're taught in Shodan, which is working towards their first degree with us, and I think those can really be so really looking to, one thing I always talk about is structure. I'm very, very big on making sure I have the appropriate structure to then accomplish the technique I want, but also defeating their structure so they're at a disadvantage as early on in the technique as possible. So I would say, just to recap, get you oriented, understand traditions and courtesies, things like that you would look to see in a Japanese dojo, to the best of our ability, and then focus on basic waza and distill out from that. Teach them fundamentals of striking, some fundamental throws, and then start to mesh that together.
So what's a class look like? Evan said, say, like when you come in, like you do your etiquette, you bow in, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, yeah. We're going to do warm-ups and then we're going to focus, I would probably say about a third of the time, maybe 40% of the time on basic waza. Again, just because there's a lot of nuances and there's some really subtle motions when you think of, Soke LaMonica introduced me and he said, you always get your all your power comes from hip rotation and body weight transfer from that. And so there's a lot of real subtleties that are unpacked and explored through the use of basic waza. And then we're going to look to take that last third of class and we're going to pick real life scenarios, right, that we're looking to do. What if someone throws a punch at me? So we'll look to reinforce some of the techniques that we're doing, right, with those real life attacks, and then we'll also do specialized classes as well, knife defense, gun defenses. When someone approaches Shodan for us, the expectation is we have a core curriculum of knife and gun defenses. We have some searching techniques that come from Soke LaMonica's law enforcement background, some escort position or escort techniques, and then two-person attacks.
That's really interesting, especially on the weapons side of things. How do you approach that with a student? Like, I mean, mentally for me, and I mean, we can go around the horn on this because I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say. But mostly it's like somebody pulls a knife on you. I don't care like what your rank is, you should be getting the hell out of there. Like, run, get in your car or get in your car and run them over. Maybe that's a that's a good technique, not really necessarily a martial arts technique. But I guess we're gonna come to you last, Evan Sensei, because you're saying you teach people this. Um, and again, I don't specifically teach anybody anything about if somebody confronts you with a sword, a gun, a this, it's always kind of abstract. It's nothing specific. Suno Sensei, do you do anything with that in your dojo about armed combatants?
Usually, we have a series in Nihon Jujutsu. It's our third fundamental kata, and by fundamental, usually you're learning it at Sandan or Nidan. So there's nothing fundamental about it, but it deals with some basic weapons attacks. But on a regular basis, we don't do defense against weapons. It's just special event stuff for us.
Okay. Since Legacy, do you have any thoughts on that? Like your martial arts training specifically being applied against a weapon? Because I know we've talked about, like you and I have talked about it, like at
Yeah.
length a lot of times, but like any thoughts you want to chip in on this?
Well, let's say you're a knife, for instance, you want to think about how much damage it can do. So you want to keep yourself furthest away as possible. So if I was defending against someone with a weapon, I would use my legs and try to kick him in the back of the leg and make him fall, like they do in MMA. And as they got closer to me, you're probably going to get hurt. You're going to have to give up an arm or something to be able to either punch them in the neck or knock them out, or break one of their legs. Or weapons are very dangerous, and you're hardly ever going to escape unscathed. So it's a very dangerous situation. I agree that try not to get yourself in those positions, but then you wouldn't have to take a martial art, right? Just talk your way out of it all the time. So the reality is, as I said earlier today, two tigers have a fight, one dies and one is severely injured. That's that type of situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what I would tell people is if somebody's going to confront you with a weapon, then you have to be a martial artist or not be a martial artist. Choose to be a martial artist because while you're going to get hurt, you're probably going to stand a better chance than somebody who's never done any martial arts. But that's all I have to chip in on that. Evan Sensei, I'm curious to know, like, because I'm thinking like, okay, if somebody pulls a knife on you, how do you talk to a student about that? Like they pull a knife, they pull a this. What are you telling them to do? Technically, I know you're going to tell them things, but realistically, what else are you telling them besides the technical stuff?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a really good question, and to build on what Legacy Sensei said, it's if I'm seeing a weapon involved, a knife or a gun or something like that, you have to assume that they're your life's in danger, right? And you have to act accordingly. Ultimately, the first thing I tell students is we're not training you to fight, we're training you to defend. It's a different mindset for that. So I always tell people your life is absolutely invaluable. If they want something from you, they want to rob you. Actually, let me take a step back to best answer that. I like to deal in the notion of probabilities. Often we hear about high percent or low percent techniques, right? So I'm trying to deal in the realm of probabilities. And so I tell people if they want an object of yours, your car keys, your wallet, your jacket, whatever, just give it to them, right? Your life is irreplaceable. Everything else is replaceable. It doesn't matter. If you feel you have to defend yourself and you're in a scenario where you can't get away from the person, yeah, definitely bug out if you can. What we do then, if all those options are exhausted and this person is absolutely hell-bent on causing you great bodily injury or death, then you have to defend yourself from that. And so we're not telling people that you're not going to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? If you understand these techniques, the fight's going to be on. Legacy sensei to what you just said, Soke LaMonica would even say, if there's a knife, expect to get cut. I'd rather get, cut somewhere less vital than take something to the chest, right? Get stabbed in the chest or something like that. And the same thing for gun defenses from it. He always said the first rule of gun defense is don't be in front of it when it goes off. And it sounds like the most basic thing, but the reality is, but him being in law enforcement, he actually got shot in the head on a second day in the job in Akron, right? And from that, and it didn't penetrate the skull, but he had, I mean, from it, but he said, we'd see training videos where police officers would be fighting for the weapon and it would be passing their head, right, or passing their chest as they're fighting for it back and forth like that. So I think ultimately those are the things I tell people. We're not training you to fight, get away, give them what they want, give them what they want again, give them more than they want. And if you have to defend, we're going to focus on hopefully high percent techniques. They're going to increase the probability of you getting out of there alive.
Love that answer. I know Sensino wants to get back to your bio, but I have one more. I have a building question on what we're talking about. When I watch you guys train, okay, so Shihan Dejong, one of the things, James Fries and I have a moniker for him. We call him the bringer of pain because when you train with that individual, you're gonna leave sore. And when we were just watching all of you guys, I was happy that I was just over on the side with my sword doing my sword stuff, not because man, it looks super painful what you guys do. And I know that it is because even, Scott Taylor said to me, man, I had to tap out at a certain point. That guy's a wrist locking expert. And he was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm too sore. So my question to you is just about the discomfort of doing that art. How do you build yourself up to it? What are the values of that? Is it always that way? In a class, is it not uncomfortable sometimes, not painful? Or is it just, nope, this is part of this art, something you got to deal with? And what do you get from that?
Yeah, yeah. Again, great question. I think, I think it really fundamentally comes down to that, to teach it safely, there's that uke-tori relationship, right? And I think that's so fundamental because you have to be able to trust, the person you're working with, especially with the level of techniques, because what we're looking to do is, from in a controlling perspective, it's no different than a choke. Right? If you're going to send a choke on someone, you're not going to choke them until they pass out. The intent is they're going to tap for a training purpose, right? And then you can learn from each other. And there's that relationship where you give each other's bodies to learn from one another. And then it's reciprocal where you get to then practice the technique next from that. So I think that same spirit, if you will, undergirds everything that we do to approach it. Obviously, and look to do it with safety. So I would say that's the biggest thing. So, it's there's no shame in tapping early, tapping often. A lot of it comes down, from, obviously there's basic safety where we teach students how to fall and things like that. But there's no way we could just crank it nonstop, maximum right to that breaking point. There's no way that's not what we're about, right? It's really understanding how to apply it correctly. And we're after understanding that will inform it. So I think we're very, very safety conscious.
Yeah, on that note, Evan said, I wasn't suggesting that you're not.
Oh, no.
Actually,
I didn't infer it as that at
yeah.
all.
Yeah. And so one of the things though I do know is that the people in your association, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it in my own words. They're tough motherfuckers, man. Like these people are tough. Like they're able to experience pain on a level that like I don't actually want to deal with that pain. Um, so I guess one of the things I wanted to crack open a little bit is that uncomfortability and how it builds you, like dealing with that pain and how it builds you into something that's different than somebody who's just doing something on air all the time. Um, so
Hmm.
when I say that to you, what thoughts do you have, or where does that bring you? What are the benefits of experiencing this type of pain and uncomfortability?
Yeah, I'll say that the pain never gets better. It never does at all. There's no building up to it. And that's what we're doing. We're attacking weaker parts, right? And we're trying to exploit that. So there's really no way to build up, if you will, something like that. I would say, often what I tell students is we're separating, something that's going to cause pain versus injury. Nobody wants to deal with injury. If you've been in martial arts, you're probably going to have, over time, you're probably going to have something that's happened unintentionally over time. But, one of the things that are part of our philosophy is that we're not looking to cause injury. It might be uncomfortable in the moment. And I listened to Sean DeJong and the episode that when he joined all of you, and he talked about when he first met Soke LaMonica and how he could just apply this technique, and it was just very painful. But then once it was released, then the pain goes away, right? There's no injury with that. So it really is just a tool to control the person, like I alluded to earlier, and that's really the goal that we're after for it. So yeah, no really way to build it up. I think you can get, I would say comfortable. You can get, I don't know if you ever get used to it. I think you understand it. I think you understand what to expect, right? You're going to see yourself being in a certain position. You kind of have a sense of what's coming next. And so I guess you have an expectation of what it's going to be like, if that makes sense, but it
Yeah, it
never,
does. Yeah,
never gets better, right? I guess is what I'll say.
I think what I'm hearing you say if is you learn to accept it, that that's
Yeah.
just part of it, right? Like if you're going to judo dojo, somebody's going to hit you with the earth. If you come to a karate, if you come to a karate dojo and you're want to shy away from getting punched or kicked, it's probably not the right place for you. And if you go to your dojo and you don't like the pain of having a wrist lock or a shoulder lock, this is probably not something that's an endeavor for you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. Very good summary.
yeah. Okay, Suino Sensei, I'm gonna kick it back over to you because I know you wanted to get back into Evan Sensei's bio a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, sure did. Although I have to say, it's kind of funny to me to hear you say you don't want to experience the pain that they have in Hakko Denshin Ryu. Some of the pain that the folks experience in Legacy Karate is exquisite and wonderful to watch, especially from the sidelines. Um, Sensei Evans, so University of Akron, got introduced to Hakko Denshin Ryu, spent some time there. Can you talk about kind of how you moved around? How did you end up in the Ann Arbor area? How did you end up teaching at the Y here, etc.? Like, let's take us forward in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, trained in Akron, moved for family purposes here to Southeast Michigan. I may or may not comment here in a little bit with who I root for on any given Saturday here and college season. But yeah, and then had the opportunity to teach at the YMCA in Ann Arbor, and they had a spot. They really, have a great history of martial arts, training there over time. I think, when I was there, the judo program had been there. Um, you know, 40 plus years. I think karate the same, or maybe similar. I can't remember which one had been there the longest. They had Aikido, multiple martial arts were taught there. And so they called it the Martial Ways program, and I went there and I had been promoted to Yondan, and I went there and asked if they had an opportunity to teach, and and they gave me that opportunity, and so I started there. We were there for 16 years, and really it was a great. It was really interesting. I think one of the things about our art is that we teach techniques. We also teach an overarching notion of principles, right? Like escapes, like atemis, things of that nature. So and we categorize our joint locks and things. And so I think we've attracted practitioners of other martial arts that have come through, karate practitioners, taekwondo, other martial arts over time, right? And so I think it just what it means is that people don't have to forget the techniques they've trained in, sometimes on the order of decades, right? If to come then and train with us and get an understanding of what our art offers. So that was my approach. And then Suino Sensei, I remember reaching out to you because I had someone from Traverse City that trained in Salat knew you and he had reached out to Soke LaMonica and said, "Hey, I'm training this really hard martial art, but if I want to defend myself when I do this, I can get arrested too, right? Because it's not, that's a whole other aspect, right? What happens in the legal aspect if you're in an engagement?" And he said, "I'd like to. I saw you found you online, and I met this guy through there." And then he's like, "Hey, this guy Suino Sensei, he's getting started up in Ann Arbor and teaching, and you really should connect with him." So that's where I had the opportunity to connect with you and train in Iaido then as well. So that was kind of my path towards it. Right now, we actually rent space and have space with the 10 Planet Group in Livonia, Michigan. They've been fantastic to us. So a shout out to Adlai Cleveland. His group is phenomenal. He's also trained in traditional Japanese arts as well. So he's been incredibly supportive of us. And so I had a chance to cross train with those folks on a limited basis. And at the time, also there was a Kali that was taught there as well. And so it's just really, those are my excursions into other arts. Obviously, if I get gone to seminars, I've always done what I can. If I could ever quit my day job, that gets in the whole way of training. But it's really been that's my story, and that's how I came to be where I'm at.
Yeah. While you were at the Y, that was that Marshall Ways program, as you noted, it was around for a long time. You must have met a lot of the folks. I'm assuming you met Deb Pearson, who was leading their Aikido program. That was the Yoshokai Aikido program. You probably knew some of the judo guys. And did you meet, I can't remember the gentleman who teaches the Shotokan program there.
Morris Lawrence, that's
Yeah, Morris Lawrence, who's been there forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I think he just had hip replacement surgery or knee replacement surgery, but I'm assuming from what I hear from his students, he'll be back after doing it. So probably 40 years of training in Shotokan
Mm-hmm.
at the Y. So guy is a fixture in the Ann Arbor martial arts community. Any other takeaways from that experience at the Y? Because it was such that kind of has virtually all been disbanded now, but during the time you were there, any other takeaways, any other stories you want to share with
Yeah,
us?
I think it was just really, no, and they really did have a fantastic martial ways program for quite some time. Sensei Lawrence really, I think he's a sixth dan now. Because one of my students actually is a sandan in Shotokan with him as well. And just I'm going to circle back real quick to a point I think that Randy mentioned where you talk about the pain that comes from other martial arts. And when I first met this guy who's my student as well, he's doing Shihan training now. One of the big jokes in our dojo was when he would just tap the gi and he would do some kicks sometimes. And I swear to God, it felt like a foot was going from across my gut coming out the other side and going back again when he would just tap the gi with a kick or a strike or something like that. So you talk about kind of the level of pain that each martial art can deliver. Really just phenomenal technique, right? And watching him strike and things like that. But the takeaway from my time at the Y was you really just love first of all, you mentioned Deb, you mentioned Morris, Kevin Watkins was the person who was heading the judo program there. Just really class individuals. Not only were they phenomenal martial artists, but just individuals of character, right? And just so very gracious and so very supportive of one another. And that was a really fantastic environment because I don't necessarily think that that model exists in a lot of places. So that was something I really took from that and very much enjoyed. And the other one was just the diversity of people that came through, right? You could have someone who had never trained in martial arts before. And I think we had someone who came to do a graduate degree with his wife at U of M. And I think he was on the Canadian national team for karate. He was based out of Ottawa, right? So you had this, this real, breadth of people who you could train with. So I think to answer your question in short, I know I can get long-winded. It's the people you interact with and just the experiences they brought.
Yeah, it's such a great society of people that are trying to better themselves. And because I hail from Ann Arbor, and I've known a lot of those people in a lot of different walks of life. It's so funny, Kevin Watkins and I, when we were little kids, trained in judo together at the Y. I was probably 10 years old or something, and then we didn't see each other for many years until we ended up. I think we reconnected in our senior year of high school. And then we didn't see each other for many years, that kind of thing. But he was in the judo scene the whole time, and it's cool that you knew him as well. And now you're with the 10th Planet. And how long have you been there?
We've been there. We actually got started right the month before the pandemic hit. So we moved
Mhm.
locations from the Y again after being there about 16 and a half years, and then started up there. So this is our 20th year for our dojo. So you know, we collectively rode that scenario out, and so we're in Livonia right now is where we're at. And yeah.
And as Randy alluded to kind of early on, there's a lot of goings on with Hakko Denshin Ryu, the greater kind of organization, and we were lucky enough to be a part of that recently. Can you talk a little bit to that? Whatever you want to share about who's doing what and how the organization's set up worldwide. Anything you care to share or are comfortable sharing about that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely. So our organization, well, I'm focused on North, or I shouldn't say I'm focused on, have responsibility in North America. But Hakko Denshin Ryu was actually founded in 1997, and it was from Soke LaMonica, his counterpart in Japan, Yasuhiro Irie, and then in Europe, Antonio Garcia. And so they had basically had a geographical distribution, and then asked Soke LaMonica to be Soke, meaning originator of the system then. And so that's what he did. And so you saw Soke Garcia, who was there right at the and multiple of his students from Europe as well came to support us. And so he's also been friends for decades. I think he met in the late 70s to Michael LaMonica, but also for his wife Chris, who was the first non-Japanese female Shihan in our system as well. So they've really kind of, had that leadership role, spearheaded it in North America for our art as well. So that's kind of essentially how we're organized globally.
And you had a big event here, or well, actually, it was in Goderich.
Mhm.
Are there other events that go on around the world? Where do they typically happen? That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say for North America, we've had you mentioned Glenn Archibald and Sean DeJong. They have a Gashaku, which is how I met Randy and some other. You mentioned Scott Taylor, Randy, and some other folks that we met as well. And then we also have every year, typically we've had a Tai Kai or a kind of a Hakka Denshin Ryu specific event, for that. And so that will move around North America. Typically, has always been in the Great Lakes area here, especially with Soke LaMonica having been located in Akron for a long time, and that was his. And that was typically going to be in that area. We've hosted several of these up here, and this was the first one that was hosted in Goderich. So kind of in that same geography, but we're certainly free to move. We have instructors on the East Coast as well, so we'll set we'll set that location probably in the new year for looking to 2025. So and then we do work to get together as much as we can to train with each other. I'd love to get a Gashaku here in Southeast Michigan. That's something on my radar screen that I'd love to implement. I think there's so much benefit to getting, again, just really quality individuals and amazing practitioners together where we can have a shared learning environment. I think that's fantastic. So, and then in Europe, we have their Taikai is typically going to be in May every year. And so I've gone the last 2 years with my reprised role to help support that.
Think I'm in, right? Soon
Yes,
as
sir. Take it over.
I want to go in another direction, Evan says, say, and this is a direction I want to go around the horn with everybody on. Um, so all of us started as just being martial artists, like a person who wanted to train and gain some skills. We've been talking about your dojo. It's been open for 20 years now. How do you, I'm going to go around the horn on this. So I'm gonna come to you last, Evan Sensei, because the show is primarily about you. Um, but I kind of know Legacy Sensei's story, but it's still good for people to hear it. Um, how did each one of us get to the place where you're training in martial arts and now you're going to teach it, and now you're going to open a dojo, and now you're going to be instructing other people in this art? So Sweetness, let's say, how did you like? I'm actually not sure when the day was that you're like, I'm gonna open a building. I think it was in Lansing, but I'm not 100% sure what led you to that decision and doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I had been sort of, an apprentice teacher at Asian Martial Arts Studio here in Ann Arbor under Carl Scott Sensei, who passed away recently. In fact, his their Memorial Dojo open house is this Saturday, right before our event. So, folks in the North American karate world that knew Carl Scott just want to keep you apprised that that's happening. Um, uh, but I had never really thought about running a dojo. Then I moved to Japan and trained. And when I came back, I went back to Asian Martial Arts Studio, and that was fine. I had a lot of friends there, but I had been on the kind of the biggest stage in the world in martial arts. I trained with incredibly famous people, the top of their profession in judo and Japanese jujutsu and kyudo. And even though I didn't train regularly with them, I trained at seminars with some of the top karate people in the world. And I just couldn't find the level of training or the culture that I had gotten used to in Japan. So that's when I started thinking about opening a dojo. So that would have been 1990. I came back in 1992, and about a year and a half later, I moved to Lansing and started looking for a space. And by August of 1993, I think, if I'm remembering right, um, I opened the first dojo, which was called Itama. And that was on the 8th floor of what they called the city center building, a stone's throw from the Michigan State Capitol, and an absolutely horrible place to have a dojo. Low ceilings, which you hit with swords, and we were on the 8th floor, so the people below us, we were accountant's office. They hated us because every time we took a judo fall, the plaster would fall off the ceiling, hit them on the head. But that was what it was for me. I wanted a place to train at the level that I was used to in Japan. I don't know if I've ever achieved it, but I've been trying ever since.
Thanks, Sensei. Sensei Legacy, how about you? I kind of know your path forward to opening a dojo. I mean, I think I could articulate it better than most people, but I know you wanted to just be a karate guy, but then eventually people started lining up behind you. So how did you open your first dojo and why did you do it? And how did that transpire?
I'm still the same guy. I still want to be a student. Um, I never advertised ever. Um, and somehow people found their way to me. I taught at the university for 35 years. So people started to follow me from there. And so I was forced to open small dojos, just enough to accommodate the people because I'm not much of a business guy. I just want to train myself. But I did like the people that were interested. So I had to make room for them. And I'm still like that today.
Yeah, you have lots of great dojos, Sensei. Yeah.
But
For me,
they're the students' dojos, they're not mine.
that's a great point, Sensei. That's a great point. Um, but I started teaching because you told me to, right? And I wanted to be like you. And that's why I opened a dojo because my instructor said, hey, you're living in a different city. You should start teaching people. And around that time, I was a second dan. And it was really, Evan said it was very fortuitous. My ex-mother-in-law belonged to a tennis club and was sitting in their lounge area. And the manager of the facility was complaining about the karate instructor not showing up to teach the classes. And my ex-mother-in-law said, "Oh, my son-in-law teaches karate. You should get him to come." And she said, "Tell him to bring his resume." And the rest for me is history. Like just that one moment in time, these a random conversation, the backing of my sensei, and now 27 years later, I'm still teaching. And that's how I get in. But this is your story, Evan Sensei. So you're training with LaMonica Sensei, and then like, why do you decide? Okay, how do you make the jump from being a student who loves training to I want to teach people?
Yeah, I really appreciate the stories that all of you shared and your path towards that. I think mine mimics yours more, Randy, from it. I think, it was one of those things. I knew I was moving to Michigan, and it was like I've known Soke LaMonica for how many years was at that point? Almost 10 years. And I told him one night, I said, I remember being very nervous. Not nervous. I was sad, moving away from the head of the system here who had trained me. And I remember that very distinctly. And I was so um, pleased by his response because he said, okay, that's great. You can open a dojo and start teaching. And that was it. And I was Yondan at the time. And it was, I just really appreciated that support. And it wasn't, it was kind of like because he told me to, right? So that may give me a real chuckle. But I think also it was really, um, and then I started looking around here in Southeast Michigan and the opportunity just happened to, present itself really, pretty quickly in that search at the Y. and they had, Suino Sensei just mentioned they had a very robust martial ways program they called at the time. So, I remember Kevin Watkins, who was heading the judo program, asked me to come in and teach class, and they want to make sure it wasn't just anybody walking in the door. I had to bring my certificates up to that point to show I was essentially credentialed for it. And I remember Soke LaMonica offering to speak to them on my behalf as a reference if it was required. So, had a kind of a vetting process there for that. And then I think, and then everything else that, we had a class schedule, and then, and really kind of the rest is history. But I think it's really something, it's certainly not a light undertaking when you commit to that, right? Because it's no matter literally the weather, however you feel, whatever it is, right? You have the expectation to be there and to engage with these students and look to elevate them and teach them in the art. So it's been a great experience.
Yeah. So then how do you go, Evan Sensei, from, I think, this is just my opinion. I think teaching at the YMCA in somebody else's facility is different than becoming the GWC, as Suino Sensei would say, the guy who writes the checks, right? Like the guy whose head is in the news. So how do you move from even that? Like, let's go a step further from you're teaching in the YMCA. I started in health club facilities as well. I know Sensei Legacy did as well. Like and we still have lots of dojos in those types of facilities, but how do you get yourself to the point where it's like, no, I need a building now with my own hours, or I'm in charge of my own schedule, and I'm going to put my neck in the noose to do this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's that's a great question. It wasn't. I don't want to say it. It was something I think finding the right model. To Legacy Sensei's point, I'm not a business guy. I didn't get into this I'm not. That wasn't the intent with why I got into this, right? Especially from a teaching perspective. And so, I think really then finding a fit that's going to be appropriate for the size of your group. I think is for the size of your dojo. I think is going to be very important. And actually, and I think as that I was able to leverage some of the network connections that I knew here in Southeast Michigan to find the spot we're at now. And actually, so I know that Suino Sensei, one of my students, Alex Santoro, who did collegiate wrestling, he's also an attorney now. He was based upon his he had extensive grappling experience. Like I said, wrestled for Central Michigan, and he happened to know the head instructor who runs the place now, and it was just really the perfect co-op. I don't want to say co-op model, but the perfect model we have to make it financially feasible for us, but also giving us a fantastic place to train.
Panekia Sensei has chimed in, who's a former guest, and he's asked the question about the why. He said, was it the old why or the new why or both? And I don't know the old why or the new why, so I'm not sure which one it would be. And I think that's to you, Evan Sensei.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the question. It was both actually. So we started off in the old one, Suino Sensei. If you remember, I don't know what when you were there at the time, but at the old Y, they had the basement had almost like it had padding, but it was like a canvas that was stretched incredibly taut. I have no idea how they did this, but that's where we started training, and then it was phenomenal for throwing because it was so soft. And then from there, and then we moved to the new Y. So both locations.
Yeah, man. 1968 is when I started in judo at the old Y. I remember the smell and the appearance of that basement dojo. I tell the story of the first time I set foot in there. I remember it to this day. It was a formative experience. And then, yeah, so you don't happen to remember the year they made the new Y. They built the new building, do you? That
I'm
would
gonna
be a
say,
tough one.
I think it was 2005 or six. One of those 2 years, I believe. We weren't there for all
Yeah.
that, right? Because we started in 2004. But
Yeah, moved a little bit across town, but a much more modern facility. And I'm not sure it was an improvement from the point of view of martial arts mats, because at the new Y, there's just tatami mats on a terrazzo floor, like a concrete floor. The old one, as you described, was canvas stretched over white closed cell foam, and it was absolutely wonderful to fall on.
Mhm.
So even though the facility was more modern and more beautiful, the mats not as soft, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, not as soft. And you always said that the phenomenon where again the judo practitioners did a great job, but we had to move the rooms twice a year, right? So when you went to the new space, there was no barrier to keep the mats in place. So you had the separations that would occur, and you're always nervous about getting a toe caught and breaking that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when you like, it was a joy to fall on. I can't even relate to that statement on any level, right? Like, I
Man,
can't.
a good sprung floor, you know, when someone is used to training on tatami on top of hard surface, they come to JMAC where we have, or E10 Dojo, where we have a full-on sprung, you know, spring system underneath the floor. It's gorgeous. Sensei Evans, you guys did a I don't know if it was just a Gashiku or it was a Taikai at JMAC one time. And Sensei LaMonica came up. I think that was Gen 2 in the basement of that building over on Research Park Drive, if I remember right. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, yeah, I remember your first location, Suino Sensei. We had shiatsu is something that we teach as part of our system as well, and so we had a jujitsu shiatsu seminar there taught by Soke Michael, and then at your other location we had a taikai. The other location you're referencing, we had a taikai there as well for it. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
listen, if you want to get the trifecta and win the crystal glasses with a JMac emblem blazoned on them, you're gonna have to do an event at Gen 3.
Okay, there you go. That's right. We'll do it.
Man, that's cool. I love this history.
One thing I want to say that I liked is when we were talking about opening dojos, nobody on the call said, I want to make $1 million, and that's why I opened a martial arts school.
Right.
Right? It was
I'm
all
working on it.
about other people and progressing the art. And I think every one of us, if we took all the hours that we pour into teaching and training, we could have been brain surgeons multiple times over. Well, I couldn't have.
No, wrong.
Well, the amount of time we put in would have been equal to the amount of time that somebody became a brain surgeon, or maybe more. Um, we're getting really close, Census, so to the 10 questions. I just want to make sure I saw Sense Legacy writing some notes, which that could be for the wrap up. Did you have anything, Sense Legacy, before we get into the 10 questions that you wanted to crack open or thoughts that you want to share?
No.
Okay.
But I'm sort of like a spare guy on these things when you're talking about an art that I don't know anything about. You know a couple of things, but you don't want to make a fool of yourself. So I just stay in my field.
Well, I'm trying not to make a fool of myself either because I don't know much about jujitsu either, other than it hurts when they grab a hold of you. That's the extent of my knowledge on it as well. Since Swino, did you have anything before we crack into the 10 questions?
I think we are at a great time and a great point in the discussion to jump into those questions.
Okay, so Evan Sensei, Swino Sensei is going to ask you the 10 questions. We ask everybody to answer as impulsively, but you can go as long as you want, as long as you don't go over 10 minutes. Because
Okay.
I'm gonna set a timer. And then if you get to 6 questions, we're gonna just yank the rug on you. Unless they're really good answers, and then we're not gonna yank the rug on you. I'm gonna turn the timer off so you can decide. So
All right, I'll switch gears here and try to be as concise as I can. So some of my students might make fun of me for not maybe not necessarily my strong suit, but yeah, I'm ready.
don't
Listen,
be concise. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, we want your you know, your full, you know, impulsive and or elaborative answers. Nobody feels like this conversation has been lagging. This has been great.
Yes.
All right. So question number 1 for you, Sensei Scott Evans. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Oh, most effective move. Oh my goodness. I'd say one of our strikes we teach a Shodan actually. It's called a Mitsubushi. It translates I think as eye crush from it, but we're not actually crushing people's eyes and pulling that Kill Bill move where you're plucking out someone's eye, right? But it's really just a strike. You do it, yeah, loose hand to the face, really targeting the upper lip, breaking up to the eyes, and we don't do it on each other for obvious reasons, but I've had someone do it before early on and just really cracked me right in the side of the jaw. And they told me it was going to happen, and my world came to a screeching halt. It was just such intense pain in the moment. Again, no injury, but it's just a really effective strike. And when you combine it, it's not dissimilar to a rising block where you can get your strike off at the same time. So I think it's a really great way to really take the advantage out of the gate.
Nice. That was called Mitsubushi.
Yeah, correct.
Nice, nice, nice. Question number 2, who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
That would be Soke LaMonica, as I've talked about. Yeah.
And you said he was both a Marine and a law enforcement officer, right?
Correct.
Nice. Nice. Number 3, who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time and why?
That's incredibly hard. I mean, when you're studying, I mean, I can't even, I don't know how to answer that, quite frankly. Because I don't want to, I don't want to be disrespectful to lineages where these things have been passed along and just really honed over time. There's people there's popular culture, right? Movies and things like that come out of Hollywood, but are those the people that are really the most effective and try? I don't know how to answer that, Suino Sensei. I'm sorry, I'm stuck.
What if we limit it to you? So what if we say, for example, who do you think the most influential martial artist of all time, if we limit you to classical Japanese martial artists, for example?
I think, obviously we have great respect to our Shodai Soke for Hakaru, right? Ryo Okuyama from that, but he was trained by Sakaku Takeda. And I think really it'd be fantastic to, I can only speak to what I know, right? And not to be in any way disrespectful for other arts. I just don't know, right? I don't know their lineages, but I think really Takeda would be a phenomenal person to have trained under because you see that the lineages, right, coming from Daiichi and how it's branched off over time would be fantastic.
I'd love to do a show on Sokaku Takeda. Man, that guy was a character, and he was really responsible for the rise of, isolated jujutsu systems, Aikido, everything else. So maybe at some point we can do that. Question number 4, what excites you most about the next 5 years of your martial arts training?
Next 5 years. In our art in particular, there's new techniques, there's new concepts taught at every level, the way it's broken out, and that's always I've really enjoyed that. But I think now, when you get to a certain level, you get a chance to look back on it and maybe with almost like fresh eyes. So I think that the training doesn't stop. I think, and the more opportunity you get to teach it, the more nuances you get from that. So the training for me is continual as number one. And then number two for training for me is really the opportunity to do things like we've done, like at a Gashoku, right? Or at our Taikai, where we just have the opportunity to cross train and get to understand different techniques and different perspectives. I think it's something really phenomenal because it strengthens the fellowship that we have that that you have with existing relationships and gives the opportunity to forge new relationships from that. So it's the people, but it's also the techniques and the technical expertise they bring to the table. Those two things excite me.
Nice. Question number 5. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you get there?
That's a deep question. Sure. My answer would be, I would say, well done, my good and faithful servant, is what I would hope to hear.
You're not the first person to give us that answer, but that's a great answer. All right. A little bit less weighty question for you. Question number 6. Do you have a favorite film or TV martial artist, whether they're actually a real martial artist off screen or not?
It's funny because I grew up watching, I knew what I grew up watching, right? It was Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, right, in the 80s. But I think, I think there's been some really phenomenal ones that I've enjoyed. And I love what the diversity of martial arts that seemingly inform the John Wick series, right? I mean, you get some kind of behind the scenes ones. That's really phenomenal. I think he trained in Sambo and Judo, but just to see some of techniques that are brought in from that, I think is really great. You can, the movie takes me a few hours to watch extra just because I'm trying to slow down and watch it, right? When I first, could get it on Amazon and do that from it. One of my other favorite movies that I saw one time is called Ong Bak, which I thought was really fascinating. Really a great movie, and I cannot tell you right now the lead actor in that one, but that really was pretty phenomenal.
Man, it's at the tip of my tongue. Randy, you don't happen to have that on your
I do
radar, do you?
not.
It's a cool
So
movie, but I can't pull it up either.
I'll bring it up in a second once I
All
Google
right. Yeah. Well, there you go. You got to do what you got to do in this day and age. Hang on. I clicked too many windows and I've lost my list of questions. Give me a second. Here we go. Question number 7. Do you have a martial artist, living or dead, of all time that you wish you could have trained with, or if you could bring them back and train with them? Who would that be?
Yeah, I mentioned Takeda earlier, but I would love to have training time with um, Ryoho Okuyama, Shodai Soke of Hakaru. I think that would really be fascinating. Just to get, and not just to train with him, of course, but just to get to know the man. You hear stories about it, but I'm removed from it, right? So it's anecdotal. To have the opportunity to train in that would be something pretty spectacular.
I mean, in a nutshell, I don't want to try and you're doing great on time, by the way. So there's not much time pressure on your 10 minutes for 10 questions. Uh, what's an anecdote or what are there stories about Okuyama? Like what kind of person he was, or how he treated his wife, or was he rich or poor? Do you have those kinds of stories at all?
Yeah, I have anecdotal ones, and I've asked this question for people like I mentioned Soke Antonio Garcia and LaMonica and again Sensei Christine LaMonica, Michael LaMonica's wife. Again, she was the first non-Japanese female to earn the rank of Shihan in the system as well, and so in the late 70s. And so the stories come from them. I think he was short, short of stature, and he loved throwing around Soke LaMonica because he was about probably 6'4", 6'5", really big. I mean, just big guy. His hands were almost double the size of mine, and from it. And so he just loved. He was a showman. He was apparently fairly gregarious. He founded the art in June of 1941, so really kind of at the height of World War II. And then and during the U.S. occupation after the war, really emphasized it as a peacetime martial art, right? Is what he emphasized. And so he didn't earn his living, from what I hear, teaching just martial arts, and he had practiced many of them. But he also was, was I believe was at one point I had a professor like or a professor role at a university that was looking to essentially merge Eastern and Western medicine. So he had a significant role in that. And so I know that there were some medical books that he had published only in Japanese, and I think they're pretty rare at this point from the 20s and 30s up to that point. So, but he loved. He would always, from what I've seen, and there's videos of this, he would always love to do demonstrations, really to brand the art, to get it out there, advertising as a peacetime martial art. And when Soke LaMonica, I know those videos, and Soke LaMonica would tell this, he would just love to throw him across the stage sometimes, and from that, and take advantage of that height differential. So, all around a phenomenal person. Sounds like both on and off the mat, on the mat for sure, but off as well.
Yeah, wow. That time, founding a martial art in 1941 during the World War II, and then the occupation. That's got to be a fascinating piece of history right there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Question number 8. If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit that you've gotten from martial arts, whether they actually train or not, what benefit would you be giving them?
I think it's, I mean, people literally have written books on the benefits of martial arts, right? That you can take off the mat and go into your personal life. And so maybe I'll just give a few of those characteristics that I feel. A sense of, obviously there's a discipline. I talked about that mind-body focus, but I think that same mental focus is something I really, really enjoy. You can see a technique, but can you do a technique, right? And so kind of that crucible, if you will, of training that really have to put into practice. I tell my students you can do a technique, or you can do a technique to the person. And we're all trying to do the technique to the person because that's where you pressure test it and you make sure that it's effective from it. And so I think that's so I would say that I would say discipline, I think, and then more of a and then adaptability. I would say, whatever is going to come your way is going to come your way. And that's going to happen in life, as we all know, right? And then also on the mat as well. So I think just the understanding that you can deal with that, with whatever will come your way.
Love it. Love it. Last 2 questions come as a pair. Your greatest achievement, your greatest regret.
Ooh. Um, I think it's really been an honor and a privilege to train with the individuals I have. I'm not going to look at one achievement or point to, a rank or lack thereof. I think it's just really just been the phenomenal experience of having the opportunity to, as time goes on and you live life and you see highs and lows. I think again, I've mentioned the notion of the people I've had a chance to interact with, form bonds of fellowship with, and people I consider family. And I think that is just that's really um, just experience that. Life's short, and I think to get a chance to experience that on and off the mat's really fantastic. And the greatest regret, I wish I could have started sooner, right? And just I think that's probably the biggest thing that comes to mind.
Nice. Randy, how are we doing on time?
We went over, but
Oh,
yeah,
that
we
was
went
mostly my
over.
fault.
Tried.
I
I tried.
apologize. It was on me. It was
Well,
on
it
me.
was. Is it Okayama Sensei? Is that who we were talking about? Did I say that right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
founder of Hakaru. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm the keeper of the time, and when we got into that, I just like hit pause on it. So because I think it's important. Um, and we are getting long on time, but before we end this, one thing I want to jump to, Evan Sensei, is you speak with great reverence about LaMonica Sensei. And any light you want to shine on him as a teacher, an individual who's been a pillar in martial arts for a long time? What should people know about him as an instructor? What do you want them to know about it from your perspective?
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. I mean, he's a man of just amazing stature and martial ability, but I think he's a very, caring individual, for that, and really just um very humble and very giving. I have stories where he would just, I mean, he would, they had an extra gi, he ordered from Tizando, and I think it was 125 bucks at the time, and he offered it to me, and I said, "How much do I owe you, Sensei?" He's like, "Don't worry about it, it's fine." And that's just one small example of how he really conducted himself in life. He was very, very giving of the art, very much wanted to help all of us achieve technical excellence so we could pass it on from that. And so I think that's really who he was. Family man, married. The story where I think it's when he got engaged. We call her Sensei Christine LaMonica. They really have a phenomenal love story over decades of their lives. I think, got married in their 20s. They're both in their mid 80s right now, and then had, 5 daughters from that. So just really, yeah, 5 girls from that. But so I think, just again, a man of, tremendous ability, but someone who is very, very giving of himself in a lot of ways. So I think that's why I think you have the reverence that myself and so many other people have for him.
Also, like the rest of us, not a good businessman because he's giving geese away for free. But I only say that tongue in cheek
Of
because
course.
I've never heard anything about um, LaMonica Sensei that isn't glowing. That's from Sensei Suino, Sensei Archibald, Sensei DeJong, now yourself. Like everybody speaks about this person as like number one, super capable, like not a person that you want his hands on you in any way, shape, or form, but also like you just mentioned, very open, warm, welcome you in, feed you, clothe you.
Hmm.
It's nice to hear you corroborate that for everybody to hear. Um, Listen, the time flies by. It always flies by on this show. People always talk about, I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk for an hour and a half, but here it is. We're an hour and a half in. And so what we always do, Evan Sensei, is we go around the horn and we share our thoughts about our time with you tonight, because we're going to have more time with you in the future. This is not our last connection. And we're going to give the last word for you. So we'll go around the horn. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, then we'll give it to you, and then we're going to kill the feed. So, Sensei Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight with Evan Sensei?
Well, I'm afraid I wasn't much of an input. It's not my field, and I don't like to make a fool of myself. So anyway, thank you for helping us create a human map, martial arts all over the world. So that at some time that'll be valuable because we'll be able to trace all the lineages somehow. And hope to meet you soon, maybe this weekend if you happen to be around. Thanks for coming to our show.
Thank you, Legacy Sensei. It's been my honor. Thank you.
Suino Sensei, what do you want to say about this hour and a half with Evan Sensei, who you've known for a long time?
Well, one of the cool things about this show is I meet people that I don't know. And another really cool thing about this show is I meet people that I do know, and I get to know a whole bunch about them that probably never would have come up if we hadn't been in a controlled setting like this, where we're having a martial arts history conversation. I'm so grateful. I loved it when we trained together in Iaido, and I love the fact that now you and I are able to get together for coffee from time to time, talk martial arts, talk business, talk whatever, and that we got to train together recently. And I know also I can't say it's quite to the planning stages, but we're definitely thinking about a Gashiku together in the future. I'm just so grateful for that. You're a positive force in the martial arts, and I like to think of myself and the other folks on this call the same way. I think we're working towards something great. I think martial arts is one of the best activities a human being can do, and I think it's a great antidote to all the negativity and artificiality in the world. I'm glad you're a part of our group in this conversation, but also in the bigger picture. And I can't wait to get together and train with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Suino Sensei.
I always so when Benson Sensei is not here, I have a hard time writing all the notes that I like to write when he's doing this, but I still wrote a lot of notes, Evan Sensei. So I like just how you cracked it open for us for your system, like strikes, throws, controlling techniques. And honestly, like the strike side of it, like hearing you talk about striking in jiu-jitsu is not something that I'm used to hearing jiu-jitsu people talk about. So it was really nice to hear you talk about that. When you talked about philosophically that your art is not to cause injury, that's also something that I don't know, my art, I always think about how I'm going to cause some injury to people when I'm doing it, whether that's with a sword or a punch or a kick. Um, um, and you said the first technique is escaping, teaching people how to escape, get away. That's excellent. I liked when you talked about the mind-body connection, like how do you connect your body and the mind? Um, this is something that was key for me that you said, we're not training you to fight, we're training you to defend. Yeah, words matter, don't they, right? Like training somebody to be a fighter or training somebody to defend themselves, or they connotate different images in your mind, and words matter. And so those words matter to me. Um, when you talked about, there was a lot of things you said that I could relate to strongly. And one of the main things was when you said you're moving away from LaMonica Sensei. When I moved away from London to come here to Kitchener, one of the main things I was really bothered by was to be at a distance from Sensei Legacy. But obviously the two of us have kept our relationship strong with our instructors, and while it was a fear, we overcame that fear, and we're still there training with those people. Yeah, most effective move on eye strike. Sensei Legacy was just talking about that like a couple weeks ago. We were teaching a White Crane seminar. It's like it's much harder to poke somebody in the eye than just punch them anywhere. But an eye strike is definitely a very effective move. Most influential, LaMonica Sensei, most influential of all time. It's happy to hear you say, I don't know. I don't want to be disrespectful. It could be many, many people. That's a good answer. I think that's a great answer to give. Next 5 years, making more contacts. I'm happy I'm in your contacts, and I look forward to you making more contacts and you opening the door to us to meet those contacts as well. Well done, my good and faithful servant. As Sensei Suino said, yes, people have said that on this show, and I think that's a great answer. Sean Benson will be remiss that he wasn't here to hear you talk about Keanu Reeves and John Wick, and that's his favorite. He loves those shows. He talks about that all the time. I definitely think we need to do a show with maybe the two of you, Suino Sensei and Evan Sensei, should do one about Okayama Sensei. Maybe the two of you should just get together and do a short or a micro on that topic, because I'd like to hear about it. And the greatest benefit, the crucible of training, you can do a technique, but can you do it on another person? That is a great question. Lots of, and you hear that in martial arts all the time. It's actually a criticism of a lot of martial arts that you do a lot of punching and kicking of the air or doing things, but can you do it to another human being? Um, it's a great question. Greatest achievement. Again, you went back to relationships and the people that you have known. And I've really enjoyed this time with you, Evan Sensei. And so before we turn it over to you, I just want to say thank you to the people who help us with this, right? And those people being, as I scroll down here, um, obviously Dredi's on the call right now in Stavros. So we want to thank those two that you know who have helped you already. But also we want to say thank you to Robert Shlumsky, Andrei Sedyshev, Alden Adair, Sidney Dauphin, Justin Shea, Daniel Holland the third, Christiana Landau, and then the one that we've been forgetting, but not recently, Emily Ruth Driscoll. Thank you, Emily, for the work that you're doing. Evan Sensei, what do you want to, what final word to you before we end this show?
Sure, absolutely. I just want to thank you all for inviting me on the show. It really is my honor to talk with you again, to interact, take questions from the folks who are kind enough to attend. Sensei Legacy, thank you. It's a pleasure to again to meet you. I haven't met you in person, but hope to do so very, very soon. So I'm just grateful. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about myself, a bit about the art that I'm so passionate about, and to share that that information with others. Really can't thank you enough.
Awesome. Well, till we see you again, thanks everybody and good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
All the
night.
best. Thank you.
Thank you.